Today I'd like to talk a little bit about red imported fire ants and also the use of Advion Fire Ant Bait, which we've had in Australia for a while now, but we've released it from the 1st of December last year in a 1 kilogram shaker pack. Got to go a bit of identification, a little bit of history and location. Why is it here and why does it survive so well here? Bit of biology and behaviour, so we look out to see what the insect actually does and why it differs a bit, from our native species. Nest identification, it's imperative to investigate these guys and make sure we are treating fire ant. The Advion Fire Ant Bait itself, we'll go through a bit of that product knowledge, why Indoxacarb works so well, product specifications, what's label uses around, the benefits of it over direct nest injection or other toxicant baits or other insect growth regulated baits and the shortness there. And some efficacy data from our trials with the guys at the Fire Ant Biosecurity Mob here in Southeast Queensland. Then we'll do a quick summary and question and answer, which can fire some questions at me or the team as well. So we'll get stuck into it, sit back and relax. One of the nuances I get from pest controllers is it's been here for so long, they've never done anything about it. And this is really strange to see because this treatment has been going on a suppression for the last 19, almost 20 years of suppressing these guys. And it's kind of worked, but we haven't been eradicating it till recently. But just to see that these, trips, we say, well, we can't see these guys out there. Well, when we're out doing field work with our big 11 kilogram bulker bags, as you can see them lined up there on this side of the truck, there's 12 bags, 11 kilos each side of the helicopter that get loaded into the hoppers. So that's about 240 kilograms per load of a helicopter. And there's between 11 to 12 sorties by 4 helicopters every day. So we're treating thousands and thousands of hectares with aerial drops with as little as 1.7 grams per square metre of this bait. So it is being treated. And I'll go through that a bit in the maps later on and where we're up to and why we aren't, as bad as what we could have been and why we've been with other countries in the world. So sit back, relax, grab a coffee. Identification, it's imperative to understand these ants and the links between these guys and why they're so surviving, so hard to get rid of once they get established, but we can eradicate them. This is the ant distinguished by its black gaster at the back of it with a 2-node petiole, as well as this beer bottle brown shape with this big ox-shaped heart head. And again, why I sort of get interested in it, it's got a lot more hair than me, and this hair is intrinsic on one of the behaviours of this ant and why it survives so well. So to understand that it is beer bottle brown with a black gaster with its stinger, and then the size differentiation, which helps us identify it quite easily and quite readily compared to native species of ants in Australia. So here in Australia, we managed to see them quite regularly. We sort of mimic DAF with a lot of their photographs that are borrowed and lent out to people is we see a 10-cent piece with fire ants. So we're going to look for a 10-cent piece on the ground and we'll usually find fire ants. Not true. It's actually a good way of getting size differentiation because on the left-hand side, with a 10-cent piece, which is almost an inch or 25 millimeters in diameter, so we get the size to scale there, you can see the different shape and sizes of the adults in this colony. Now, they are all of a similar adult style, but they're in different sizes. So we haven't had them as long as in America, so they're all scattered around here. But in America, they've had them so long, they've trained them to back into a circle so they can have a mug shot. So you can see the different sizes from this 2 millimeters right up to this 6 to 8 millimeters. And they're all the similar age and they're all the same maturity. It's a distinguishing point of these guys with this black gaster and this size differentiation. These are not younger insects being smaller. They are fully grown, matured adults, but they are differentiating size, which is a good differential for the fire ant identification of red imported fire ant or Solenopsis invicta. Distinguishing stance when they're going to bite, they put their mandibles down, they bite the surface they're going to be attached to, and then they raise their gaster in the air for the stinging motion. They also sting en masse. They get on top of something that's invaded their pitch or their area, or it could be a cattle's hoof, or something could be like a person just walking through a paddock or whatever and stand on them. Can be a sheep grazing and they get on the nose or whatever, they climb all through it, and then all of a sudden they'll start stinging once and not one at a time, but usually en masse. And when they do sting, they bite down with their mandible and they sting with their gaster. So the bottom middle shot shows you a bite mark of the mandible with also the sting of the gaster being the venom or the poison being injected deeper. So that is that. But inherently, they then pick their gaster up, anchor with their mouth the same place, but move their gaster around. So on the right-hand picture, you can actually see the swirl marks of the individual ants that have bitten this gentleman on the elbow. And they're actually showing that there is a mandible mark as well as multiple gaster or gaster sting marks. And they will sting and sting until they run out of venom. They'll drop off, they'll go back, reload with venom and grow the next 3-4 days and reload with their venom naturally from the natural food, and they're ready to sting again. They don't die like bees or wasps. Once they lose their stinger, they're done. These guys will regroup and take over. And it is a very nasty bite, and we have to watch out for this bite because unlike bee stings where we gain an immunity to them, once these guys bite us, they bite us the next time, we get a weaker immunity. So we can get traces of anaphylaxis later on if the more and more we get bitten. So try not to get bitten, avoid it at all costs. And this is why it's a big part of getting it out of our environment, because we want to claim back our environment in these strange times. People are enjoying their outdoors more. Bit of a brief history, where they come from. They originated from South America in the Amazon jungles around the river and came down to the surface, around to the edges of the sea by the River del Plate, or the River Plate in Rio de Plata in Uruguay. They're transported in the timbers to mining equipment in the US in the 1930s. So it was just rough sawn timber, the stuff was on them, they weren't clean, there wasn't much quarantine back then. And again, another part of that is when they're transported to places, these places don't have natural predators like armadillos or native fish like piranha that actually work against these ants and will keep the numbers down. So we see here on the map to the right, the arrow from the River del Plata in Uruguay to the arrow in Texas. And then we've got the similar regions. Just above it, we have the Tropic of Capricorn just above Uruguay, and just above, just below the Texas, we have the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So these areas around these areas where we actually have got the tropics is subtropical area, so above and below. So we're getting very similar. So this areas of tropical rainforest, high water levels and subtropical areas is perfect. And they're found in southeast Queensland. And they're not to be sort of confused with another fire ant, which is on the label, which is tropical fire ant, or Solenopsis geminata. We had an outbreak in 2010 in Darwin Port. And also currently there's an outbreak of these guys in Christmas Island. So equipment being brought into Christmas Island to help build refugee camps and stuff has brought in an outbreak there. And they're currently trying to get on top of that with some decent products and decent treatments. So again, we can see here the areas of where we've gone. We're just below the Tropic of Capricorn here from Rockhampton down. We've had an outbreak in the subtropics just there at Rockhampton, the Port of Gladstone, brought in on mining equipment. Again, Port of Sydney, again, then into Melbourne. We've had some outbreaks, and we also had in January 2019 a small outbreak of the fire ant in the Port of Fremantle. So it is imported in mining equipment and containers that isn't quarantined, so it is an incursion. And this is why it's a biosecurity matter, because it's imported, they take over native species areas and drive native species out and kill them. We have no natural predators. So please remind yourselves, this is still a biosecurity matter. Things need to be reported. And the number for the biosecurity hotline is 132523 if you have any doubts and concerns outside the map area I show you shortly. So understanding also then, in mining equipment being moved around the world, we have now currently, and I'm involved in some treatments around Laos and North Vietnam and southern China, around the Tropic of Cancer again, right across this line that's perfect climates. But that's intrinsic to say also there are some studies in the US in the upper Appalachians, the tropical fire ants, red imported fire ants are now being found around and just below the snow line in the Appalachians in the Carolina Mountains. So they are adapting and they do acclimatize quite well and are taking over when there's no natural predators. So we've got to look at where we are and what the history is a bit before we actually do that. So thinking about that, Australia and China and Texas are really no different because we're all moving stuff around. It's going to our ports and the climates are very, very similar. And coming back to it also about the treatment of going back to when people say, oh, we don't see any treatment done, it's out of control or whatever. It's not. If they hadn't have done the suppression treatment they've been doing over the current 18, 19 years, we would have had them further north than Gladstone naturally. They would have been out west further than St. George or even over into the South Australian border around Broken Hill, that area, and even as far south as maybe Coffs Harbour or even further down to Port Macquarie, those areas being uncontrolled. And most of the incursions and outbreaks we have outside the controlled area are still brought in by transport of goods and foods. It's like sending soil or sending hay or sugarcane mulch or some agricultural product or machinery that way to get outside. So understanding it's moved around that way, and that's why it's moved across the globe as well. This is the current location map of Southeast Queensland. This circular line around the outside, the black dotted line, is the exterior zone. If you go onto the maps, this is updated every month. You go onto the map and you find any fire ants or think you find fire ants, you must contact biosecurity if you're within 5 kilometres of this line. We're trying to keep that biosecurity line in that front at the forefront of things. And understanding before you treat, you should be trained on nuances and understanding about those sort of things. So there is online training available from Biosecurity Queensland too, and you can contact them, as I said, on 132523 for any updates and any reports, whatever. So this is about a 9,000 square kilometre area is heading out towards the Lockyer Valley. We're trying to protect that. I've got a map in a second that shows how we're pushing from west to east. So we're actually trying to keep it out of our food bowl, trying to contain it. And by driving it towards the water, we will get eradication in this period of time we're allotting and aiming for. So here's the map of the current identification. Suburban and urban areas require hand spreading by PCOs. So pest management technicians and homeowners are critical to this, because homeowners are reticent to have bait dropped aerially by drones or helicopters because they've got swimming pools, they've got pets, they've got garden beds. They don't want it, the rainwater tanks on their roofs. They don't want it being, dropped just willy-nilly. And they're also in their backyards 7 days a week. They understand if their dog's getting bitten or if there is a mound that appears during winter. They understand where the treatment is. We can't be in every house every day to protect them from termites. So don't expect we can be in every house every day to protect them from fire ants. The homeowner identification is imperative. As I said, they're there 7 days a week and they live there. And the handheld pack provides PCO with additional service to offer. Baiting is a lot more effective than direct nest injection, and I'll go through that. The yellow area to the left is the yellow broadcast area, is where we're doing the broad spread broadcasting by helicopter, and we're driving, as the blue arrows indicate, towards the east. But as we get closer into the built environment, those helicopter drops are less and less, so we have to rely on more hands-on ground field treatment by either the homeowner or us as pest managers offering a valued service. Biosecurity also gives monthly updates, and the updates are showing the treatment plans aerially in this map here, where the yellow areas of where they're treating aerially to make sure they're getting good contact. Once they do a broad acre treatment, they can go back and check it every 16 weeks to make sure they mop up a few spots. There may be, from those aerial treatments, some shadows under some trees, or there may be some areas around a building or around a creek bed. They can't get in and can't spray aerially, so they have to get in there with their Argos and hand treat. But that's a service we can add to the property owner as well. And that's something we need to be on the forefront of, and it is quite economical to get those treatments with good products. And that's the differentiation of those products. Understanding as we get towards the built environment, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge and a bit of more soldiers on the ground. We need more people on the ground to do these treatments. So behaviours in biology. These ants are intrinsically different because they are both monogyne and polygyne. They have one queen in a single colony, and also they have multiple queens in one nest. This is the importance of identification of them, getting their mitochondrial DNA and taking samples. There are known areas of hotspots of polygynes, and there's known broad areas of monogynes. And it is a belief they're born all monogyne, but with the disturbance of one nest, all of a sudden the multiple male winged alates will take a queen and drag her off and become monogyne nests. So that's the science behind it. I get pest managers say, oh, we dug over a nest to do a treatment like a direct nest injection, and they're already there to fly. We're doing identification. They haven't come out and done any bait. They're trying to blame someone for the spread of them. There is continual winged alates, male alates in the nest. It is not a sign of flights. They do fly to do mate flights, but they're not as broad as what normal ants or then opposite termites are. So with termites, we know they're going to alate. They do alate and grow wings. With red imported fire ant and tropical fire ant, those winged alates, males, are in the nest always, and they help with the grooming process. The diet consists of a wide variety of meats, insects, grasses, seeds, plants, sweet saps. They're omnivores. They'll eat most things, as well as native species. So they'll take over native species of ants areas. They'll commandeer them, they'll kill them off, because they are a more ferocious and more vicious ant. The nests are ground made of soft aerated soil. These nests are higher above the soil level in cooler months to aid in the solar warming. So they're using the warmth of the sun in the day to warm up the nest to keep it nice and warm. And hence in summer, the nests have no distinguished entry points, but the nests are down lower in the ground in summer. So it's not like a bull ant's nest with like a volcano with one central spot in the middle that the ants come and forage out. The mound is a mound of the nest, and the entry points are within a metre of that part of the nest. And that can be from 1 to 2 metres of that mound of that aerated soil. So there could be some 6 to 10 to 15 entry points around that area. And that's really, really important if we're going to look at, 1, doing direct nest injection treatment, or 2, do a bait treatment, because a bait treatment would be more efficacious because you've disturbed the nest with a direct nest injection. As the insects come back with a bait, they take it deeper into the nest. And there's multiple entry tubes, as I said. Could be up to 15 plus, depending on the size of that nest. Again, on the left-hand side, we have the summer mound buried local down on this concrete path on the left-hand side. You can barely see the fire ant nest, but in winter, it's more prone. It's getting that sunlight, aiding the warmth. In summer, it's lower, aiding in the coolness. So you're not getting the heat of the direct sunlight in the middle of the summer, like when the ground's 34, 35 degrees Celsius, because the ambient air temperature or direct radiating sunlight is around 37, 38 degrees C. So in summer, the queens are down deeper in the nest with the eggs. So that nursery is all being looked after, whereas in summer, it's aerated up more in the ground and up to the, as you see on the right, it's more of a soft, pile of, soft sand. So it's easy to treat the nest. Bait is great year round. These guys feed year round, regardless whether it's summer or winter. So it's really good to use a good, efficacious bait like Advion Fire Ant Bait. As I said, it basically looks like someone's dropped a bag of potting mix on the ground. It's soft, aerated soil. There's no volcano. There's no central entry point. The entry points are within that 1 to 2 metres around. So if you're going to spray the nest, be careful where you're walking, because you may walk over an entry point before you get to actually dig it over and spray, and you may be attacked. So for occupational health and safety, have a good look around. So if you put the bait around, and which is when we do the application, we do not put the bait directly on this earthen mound. We sprinkle it in 1 to 1.5 metres around this area. So the bait is taken up by all the insects travelling back and forth from the entry points, not on top of the nest. Again, when we disturb the nest, most people call these eggs. These are the eggs and larval stages that are in that aerated soil to keep them nice and warm. It is a part of the hatching process. Ants are not like chickens. They do not sit on their eggs. They use the environment around them to keep them warm, to keep them at that constant temperature. So this is what we've got to look at. When we do disturb and we do direct nest injection treatment, we then don't actually get efficaciousness, because these guys can hatch later on if we're not using the right rates of insecticide or even the right insecticide for direct nest injection treatment. Year round, they're always with wing males and tending the eggs and larvae. As I said, in summer, the ground man nests are smaller and lower to the surrounding ground level. Heat insulation from the hot weather. The queen or queens will be down deep in the mound at this time because it is so warm near the surface. In winter and the cooler months, the mounds are more prone to height and allow sunlight and access to add the daily warmth. The queen or queens will be naturally higher up in the mound at this time. So understanding where we're treating to where we're getting our treatment happening. If we're going back with a bait into the nest, the insects take it directly where we need it to go to the other larval stages to be fed up. If we're going to be trying with poison, we've either got to dig very deep, dig shallow, do we dig deeper? And it's a bit of hit and miss, especially in summer where we might see one nest and we can't see the direct nest in multiple queens right next to it. And this is where they butt off or drag off, and we come back and we haven't had a good success. So this is an important aspect of treatment consideration of your treatment program, whether DNI is going to work purposely or whether the bait's going to be efficacious. And then I'll go through a few bait differences as well. Distinct behaviour, really, really topical at the moment after we've had these rains here in the southeast Queensland where the treatment area is. This has actually spread them. Most other insect species will be under pressure. They'll be killed off by this, but this natural product of these guys, our behaviour of these guys, actually doing this rafting, they're getting the queen, the alates, the larvae, the male alates are there on top of that as well. They're all rafting up, and they raft because of all those hairs on their body. This is what gives them this ability to sit on water and raft up. They take the queen, the eggs, the larval stages and everything, and they just drift down river. So this is really why it's good for suppression, is when they've come into a port, it's very rare that we get the port to get the water to flush upstream. So if we had this problem further up and they're imported into the Lockyer Valley first, or into Toowoomba, or into some interstate port inside, like a big river that was upstream, like a Mississippi or a Murray River that was still used, this would be a lot more intrinsic and a lot more outbreaking if that was done. So understanding this behaviour. So the whole colony is mobile as one group. They get to a part of land that's a bit higher, water drops down, they start a new nest, and that's how they survive. So this can intrinsically spread these guys. It will not oppress them or kill them off. So the flood is imperative, that it is actually a part of their survival techniques, which they learned in South America. And our native fish are not predatory to reefer. They haven't got the taste. So that's another part of guppies and trout and bream and stuff like that. They haven't developed that. So that's why piranha and armadillos and native species are that. So I'll just click over to David Mars for a sec so I can have a glass of water.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so just reiterating what Peter was speaking about with our Advion Fire Ant Bait. So it is for exclusive use for red imported fire ants and tropical fire ant. As he mentioned, Indoxacarb is the active ingredient at 0.5 grams per kilo. It can be used in two ways. It can be used as a broadcast application, so really small amount. Only 1.7 grams per square metre is needed, so very, very small amount. And then you can do individual mound treatments at 15 grams per mound. I've actually seen this product work. Peter and I fortunate enough to go on a trial with Peter last year, where we found probably, I think it was close to 10 nests in a 10 square metre radius. Peter actually got them ID, DNA tested, and they were polygon nests. We're actually going to go back in the 7-day period to see how well it worked. We had a fair bit of rain between that period, so we went back in the 10-day period and we had no live nests. So worked very, very well. I was very impressed. Pete, back to you.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's low rates, as we say, 1.7 grams per square metre when it's spread with a spreader or aerially. From the helicopter, it's calibrated quite well. When you look at that, it's probably only a teaspoon per square metre. When we go to 15 grams in volume is equivalent of a small 200 ml coffee cup, a regular coffee. So it's aerated, it's like corn, but I'll go through the product a bit. It's a unique class of chemistry. It's an oxydiazonine class of chemistry. It's the only chemical in its class, an Indoxacarb, as you know, with Advion ant gel, Advion cockroach gel, and Arolon. It's a very, very good product. It's non-repellent and it's low use rates. This ability of this Indoxacarb profile to work, this novel mode of action, is really, really good because we don't get a resistance build up within it. It's empowered by the meta-active compound. It's a highly potent metabolite and gives us exponential control because the insect is actually being used to take the bait back into the nest or into its colony and community, and they transpose that through food and trophallaxis. So they actually really push it on further. It's got, low, acute and oral dermal toxicity levels. It's not an irritant, it's not a carcinogen, and the signal word on the label, of course, is caution. So I'll go through a bit on the chemistry side of this, what the meta-active chemistry is. The delayed mortality allows for the increased transfer of the active ingredient through the nest. So ants, when they actually are eating, are geared up to either eat liquids or solids by the queen. They're signaled to pick up liquids or solids. The Advion Fire Ant Bait is a corn-based grit covered in a pool of oil or a coating of oil. So both ants are attracted to it. Some ants come up to the corn grit and lick the corn grit and get the oil off it, where others will come back, pick the corn grit up in their mandible and cart it back into the nest to feed it to the larval stages that then break it down into a liquid that gets passed on. But it's not until it gets into the larval stage or the insect's gut does this meta-active happen. We're relying on the enzymes in the insect's gut to cleave off this chemistry to trigger this phase of the enzyme to make it meta-active. So this is why it's safer to put out. So it gets HACCP accreditation in other products. So it's safer to put out, and it's not as toxic until it gets into the insect's gut. So if a mammal was to actually accidentally, like a dog or a cow or us, to accidentally eat it, we don't have those enzymes, so it's not as potent as what it is when it gets to the final insect stage and that meta-active. So when it then trophallaxes, passes on that information and passes on those nutrients and passes on to the queen, we get multiple stage of death across that insect colony. So the death then binds to the target size, blocking the insect's sodium channels. They can't move. The insect experiences paralysis and is followed by death. So it depends on the amount of dosage they get, how quick they die, and therefore also then the amount of dose that's out there for the amount of insects. The multiple factor is we can put down some insecticide, and there's 10,000 insects there, we'll get a good hit, we'll get 100% kill. We put the same amount down, there's 100,000 insects there, we might get 90% kill. But it does work with this meta-active compound, working as a really a domino effect. The delayed knockdown, it's a superior bait matrix. It's multiple sizes of bait, not just one base corn grit size. The bait uptake may kill a nest in 3 to 4 days with monogon, and higher efficacy with less treatments. Our bait is the only toxicant bait that will be good on the ground for 3 days. There's another one out there that actually flashes off within a day, and it is no good on the 2nd or 3rd days. So it's got a very small limited treatment window. So long-term results, quicker kill and less applications compared with IGRs. Insect growth regulator baits are low and slow in dosage so that they can get the insect to the next set of eggs not to be, fertilized. So then the insect growth regulator stops the growth, stops the numbers. But unfortunately, there is numbers of adults still around with other queens that they pull away, and they can start moving nests on even further. So we've got to understand the differences between a toxicant bait and an insect growth regulator and how they work. Insect growth regulators work pretty good on suppression, but they're no good on eradication because they're not toxicants. Cost effective, low application rates. Really, as you see, 1.7 grams per square meter. So we've got a kilogram bottle, but we've got 1.7 grams per square meter. There's a lot of treatment, about 800 square meters in that bottle. So I understand the reduced part of it. The bait, Advion Fire Ant Bait, is corn-based, oil-coated grit in milled sizes for preference of fire ants. It's got to be different sizes because there's different size ants. And we know ants are pretty powerful in picking things up, but it just makes it more convenient for them to save their energy if a smaller ant can pick up some bait, or it's too big for it to pick up, or a bigger ant walks past smaller, finely ground bait. Ants find both the grit and the oil highly palatable, and the active is both in the treated oil and the grit, as I said before. Different ants are programmed by the queens to forage for food or water, and the moisture feeding different stages of life in the nest. The larval and reproductives. The ants take the solids back to the larval stages, the late larval stages, which break it down again into a liquid, and that is then fed around the rest of the colony to the queen, and those guys feed it back to the other ants as well. So this domino effect is what's happening. Important to bait palatability, important to bait freshness. If we're going to go fishing, we want to have fresh bait. And that's a part of our bags being packed in vacuum sealed bags. They're not just any way done. This is part of bait freshness, not keeping it next to our smelly chemicals like any of our SPs or anything like that. Keeping it fresh. We know we want to do that. We don't put our lunch next to it. So why we want to put their lunch? Ants do not eat solids. As I said, they pick it up in their mandibles and take it back into the nest. That's why they drag worms or bits of spiders or bits of leaves back into the nest. They don't actually eat solids and chew it there. They have grabbing mouth parts and then sucking mouth parts where they take it back to the larval stage, which they break it down. Adult ants transport the mantle back to the nest. Once solids are converted to liquid nutrients, those larval stages then feed the rest of the colony. Indoxacarb does not break down this process, but it becomes more potent with that meta-active. So it's not being strung out shorter, it's actually being compounded and made stronger and stronger, which makes it really, really valuable for doing a lot of treatments, as we've found with other products with Indoxacarb. Here's a field test with 5 grams of Advion Fire Ant Bait placed on a log right next to where the fire ants are walking. So we can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the top 2 photos a time lapse. So it's only taken basically an hour and a half for that 5 grams of bait, or 90% of it, to be consumed by those fire ants and taking it down just before it gets on dusk. So they're actually taking it down. And then we go and do some trials where when we're inspecting ants, we do a count. We disturb the soil, we see how many fire ants come out, and if there's over 100 within 15 seconds, we give it a 3 count. If it's less than 50 or so, we give it a 2 count. If it's less than a dozen or so in 15 seconds, we know there's only a few numbers there, so we give it a 1 count. Of course, 0 being no ants, whatever. But at 26 hours, we did a 2 count. As you can see on the ruler on the left-hand side, there was, probably 50 to 60 ants in that 15, 16 seconds. 2 days later, we're down to about 10 or 15, so we're down to a 1 count. 72 hours later, I wouldn't advise this, regardless, don't put your hand on a fire ant's nest. We don't know what's there or whatever, but they've actually gone 72 hours later on and there are no fire ants in that same nest that's being treated with a monogame series of ants there. Polygames maybe a couple of days later because we have more queens, more insects to kill. So I'll let the bait take its effect, get the ants talking to each other, communicating, trophilax, feeding, and you'll get that common happening of that nest kill coming down. Higher efficacy with left treatments. EPA reduced risk classification, so it's safe to put out in places out where livestock are and stuff like that. Of course, we don't want the livestock to eat it because they're taking the bait away. So it's better to adjust livestock out of the treated paddocks in those areas. We want the bait to work on the ants. We don't want anything else taking it up. Fast, effective colony control from 24 to 72 hours. And no other product has the effect in such a short amount of time. There is no other toxicant bait on the market can match it for pound, and that's even why the National Red Imported Fire Ant Program has taken on Advion Fire Ant. And just 1 or 2 applications to achieve year-long control. We can do a second treatment within 2 weeks of the first treatment. Most other products need to do treatments 15 to 16 weeks apart, and they can only do 3 treatments a year. We can do 2 weeks and we can do 4 treatments up to a year. We're trying to keep the amount of toxicant out, but our product has that ability to do it in 2 or 3 treatments max. Whereas other products, we're doing 3 or 4 treatments over a year, maybe 5 treatments over a year and a half before we're gaining control. And with monogames, that may be a little bit sooner, but with polygames, it may be a lot later. And just 1 or 2 applications, as I said, as a season, not also just in weeks. Here's a longevity and speed of control. So the green line at the top is a control. It's actually the time. So we've got an area that we know there's some fire ant baits, but we're also trying against Advion Fire Ant Bait, against hydromethanolon, against a fipronil bait, and then against bifenthrin in sand. So that's bifenthrin can't be a bait because it's a repellent. But what we've got is here at the pre-treatment, we've got the counts of similar number of nests, mounds, a number of actives around the 14 to 15 nests. The control believes they're going, we see that nothing's affected them. Those ants survive over to the right-hand side towards the dotted key. But then we go to the blue part of then we go with the fipronil bait. Yeah, it gives a bit of control by the time we get 8 weeks out after treatment, but we're still getting 2 or 3 nests left behind. So then we come down to the next one, which is the bifenthrin, comes down to below the bottom, and that gets an actual 0, but I'll explain that in a minute. But then the hydromethanolon is just a little bit less than what the fipronil bait is as well. But Indoxacarb comes right down here to 60 hours after treatment with 0. Then got a couple of insects, couple of Unicef down to 3, down to 0 at 3 weeks. Well, we've got some eggs that have hatched. That's a natural part of eggs hatching in the natural sun. So we've got some numbers come up. But again, the Advion's actually being picked up, and then it actually pushes those numbers back down again with trophilaxis. So they actually come down. But what we're seeing here with the bifenthrin being 0 is the reason why the bifenthrin's got a 0 count is because it's repellent, the ants have walked away from the area. This still hasn't killed them. They're not there, but they've just moved on. It hasn't eradicated them like the Advion Fire Ant Bait will eradicate, as you've seen just there. Long-term results. After a single application, in controlled field trials of a nest with no counts of 3 to 4 days after treatment with monogame colonies. Polygone counts were out to 7 to 8 days with the time needed to control the additional queens. We need to be able to control those queens. If we can't get control of the queen, we cannot control the colony. So this is replicated in both Australia and the USA with trials. Insect growth regulators, pyriproxyfen and such, take 3 to 4 weeks to get the numbers down and require up to 3 or 4 treatments to get absolute 0 count. And those treatments are at least 15 weeks apart. So if you've got multiple queens, they drag across, you might have a certain outbreak. That's why you need to come back and treat a 3rd or a 4th time to get suppression on those numbers. And these are direct benefits of using toxin baits compared to growth regulators. So we can be using something to suppress, but we're trying to eradicate, so we need to kill, and we don't want to keep coming back, similar to baiting with termites. Some owners of termite baiting, they think we're feeding the termites and not eradicating because the bait kits can keep them consumed. That's, again, an insect growth regulator. It's very like that symbolism that happens with homeowners there. Doing a mound treatment, do not apply the bait to the top of the mound or disturb the mound in any manner. Applications is a soil 1 meter around that nest mound. Get the bait into the places where the ants are transversing and exiting the nest. They'll pick it up and take it down deep into the nest for you. Application can be made any time of day, but most effective when the ants are actively foraging. Why put a bait out and let it go overnight? You know, it's not common sense. Put the bait out fresh, put it out mid-morning as the ground warms up. Make sure the surface temperature is above 15 degrees Celsius. It's, you know, they're warming up, they're getting out in the day, the sun lights up, you know, blue sky, the birds are swinging, they're going to get out and start eating, but don't go too hot either. If we're going to get to a temperature around 35, 36 degrees Celsius around the ground's going to be a lot hotter. They won't want to be out, they'll be in their nests. So we've got to look at things, what we do in the environment we're putting it in, the timing of our treatments. You know, bait is freshness. If we're going to go fishing with bait, we want to make sure the bait's fresh and the bait's, you know what the fish or what the target species are going to eat. And for optimal factors, use fresh bait only and do not apply if the grass is wet or dew. And also look at things like golf courses or maybe turf farms, if you're going to get into those businesses. Look at the way they irrigate and when they irrigate. The last thing you want to do is get wet bait and have the toxicant washed off or the corn bait split and it's not palatable anymore, it gets left on the ground. So that's a really good part of looking at the environment we're treating, not only the insect we're treating, we've got to look at what we're doing and when we're doing it. Imported fire ant mound treatment. This was done in autumn, so a good time of the year to be doing these treatments. Advion Fire Ant Bait with 4 teaspoons with a fipronil-based bait at 4 teaspoons. And these green bars going over to blue and grey are days treatment. So day 3 after treatment, there was 93% effect. 100% would go across to 96. So even out to 116 days, that treatment of 4 teaspoons or tablespoons of Advion Fire Ant Bait gave great effect and kill at 95.5%. The fipronil was in there, but it wasn't effective and across the board. And once we get insects to start breeding up or alating off and molting off again, we'll actually then get other insect activity. So we're not eradicating it. And this is a part of doing control versus eradication. So we've got to actually control them to eradicate them and not try and suppress them anymore. And that's the reason why we're introducing Indoxacarb. So less applications equals less costs. This is the findings of the Red Imported Fire Ant Eradication Program. Superior performance kills and speed of action, kills a nest within 3 to 4 days. Performance has been increased from 7 to 10 days, allowing for quick retreatments. Kills the nest within 3 days and no mound movement or potential mating flights. So a high level control approaching 100%. There is not one bait or one treatment out there that will give you 100% efficacy in the natural environment. You've got to control that environment. Together with a high level control, the fast speed of action delivers eradication with reduced retreatments in a shorter period of time. So the reduced need for retreatments is a reduced need for labour costs as well as chemical costs. And if the ideal treatment window is short due to rainy seasons, bait can be effective in 2 to 3 days. As we've seen, we get these nice 2 or 3 day breaks, and then we get 4 days of rain. You get a chance to get some toxin in there and into the ground before these guys can take off or raft off again. And if they have got that toxin in their bellies, they will take it off as they raft as well. So I'll hand this back over to David and he'll take on some things that really keep going for us. So Dave, thanks very much.
Yep. So just some of the reasons why homeowners should use a pest controller, a professional pest controller, rather than trying to do it themselves. So they need to trust the expert. As Pete's alluded to, red imported fire ants can be very, very dangerous and disturbing the nest. You know, fortunate enough, we haven't had deaths in Australia, but there has been deaths overseas. So staying safe and avoid being bitten is really, really important. Ensuring the correct bait is applied. So professional pest managers will have the best, as of today, they will have the best information on what bait is the best product to use. And the cost for the homeowners, so to do it themselves and pick it up from their local hardware, it's going to cost them $22 a nest to do that treatment. So always important to use a trained and certified professional. We really recommend professional pest managers for these type of applications. So just some of the things we touched on here, and having a look at the difference between Advion Fire Ant Bait and hydromethalin. So the amount of bait you need per nest. So we only need, as Peter mentioned, 15 grams, a really small amount around the nest. Hydromethalin, 50 grams. How many times we need to treat? As again, we just went through 1 to 3 treatments with the Advion Fire Ant Bait compared to possibly 3 to 6 treatments to ongoing for other products. How long for a potential eradication? As we said, if you're talking about polygons, you can expect to wait 7 to 10 days. We can have control within 72 hours. Hydromethylene, you could be looking up to 3 months and continually going back for those multiple treatments. So some of the other things, and this is more pertaining to around Advion Fire Ant Baits versus direct injection of nests. So the bait is a less invasive treatment and easy to handle. So the red and pointed fire ants, you're not treading on top of the nest, as Peter alluded to, you're treading around the nest. So all the ants are thinking about is they're just picking up food. Ants will happily feed as per normal, taking the toxin deep into the nest and feeding their other nest mates. Disturbing the nest can be dangerous, as we talked about. So if you're direct injecting a nest, you're disturbing that nest before you can actually make the treatment, and the potential to get seriously stung is there. So you just need to be really, really careful on doing that. Also in the warmer months, as again Peter alluded to, nests can be really hard to spot. So trying to do direct nest injection in the summertime can be really difficult. Whereas fire ant bait, you can broadcast around an area where you think those nests are. Also, trying to do direct nest injection, I'm sure every pest controller who's on this call, you could be in a field trying to treat these, doing a direct nest injection. So trying to source water to mix chemicals. I think we've all been in the situation where trying to pull hoses through gardens, things like that, can be really cumbersome and tiring. This is simply pick up your 1 kilo shaker pack and hand spreader at most, and off you go. So where can you find the Advion Fire Ant and the 1 kilo shakers? So they're available from the 3 pest control suppliers. So AgSurf, Garrett, and Globe. I suggest you contact your preferred supplier, and they'll be able to give you pricing on this. They all have it in range and available in stock. So just a summary on what we talked about. So it's a highly palatable bait. Those trials we did last year, Peter and I spent some time talking to this client. Time we went back to have a look, it was probably 30 minutes. The majority of the bait had been taken back into the nest. So they were very quickly onto it, and the ants were quickly taking it back to the nest. It has the ability to knock down both monogyne and polygyne species. Some of the baits out there will only do monogyne. So the luxury with Advion Fire Ant Bait is it doesn't matter, it will do both. The superior speed and action and high level of control, and those long-term real results. Ease of application, as I mentioned before, literally you've got it in that shaker pack, easy as picking it up out of your vehicle. So and the best part about it is it's going to save your money, there's quicker results and less applications.
Thank you, David. Okay, so just by way of summary, I'll just say a good marketer will always say that you can get some more materials on our website, and you can see the website there up on the screen. And we also offer some training, and when you are an accredited Advion applicator, you can get one of these fabulous magnetic vehicle ute stickers. So let us know if you're interested in that. I'm going to now open for Q&A. We have a few questions. So, Pete, I've offered to answer a couple of them live. So the first question here, Pete, is have we seen any bait shyness in the trials? This customer says that they've seen the bait with other IGRs and then they reject it and pile it at the base of the mound.
No, we haven't seen any of that. The reason being, a good question, it's the bait freshness. A lot of people use stock feed for their base of their corn-based grit, and that's really poor quality corn or maize. It's harder, the ants don't quite like it. It can be actually kiln dried to then get effect of their chemical in. So it's a part of the cooking process of making that bait. And unfortunately, it's too hard for the ants or the larvae to digest it. It may be attractive to the foraging ant, but it's not attractive to the larvae to eat it. So they then reject it and the ants take it out, like similar to ant frass out of an ant nest. So we don't get that problem because we use food-based or food-grade corn for our base.
Great. Thank you, Pete. Another question. Biosecurity are asking residents of the Gold Coast to treat yards, even if they don't have ants. What are our thoughts on this? And I know you do have thoughts on that.
I have got to be careful because there are people from biosecurity watching this. I don't upset anyone. Hi guys, I like the work you do, but some things you do really upset me. The Queensland Pest Management Act states that we're not supposed to treat for insects unless they're actually there. So that's one against my license. But the second part about it is we're not supposed to be treating off-target species. And that's not that the bait's going to work on off-target or off-label species. It will work. But what happens is our stewardship is to aim for the tropical and red-imported fire ant, is not to broadly spread it around so all ants get eradicated. We have to look after our native species. They're a part of our environment, our biology. But what happens is when we eradicate those native species, the imported species, the native species over the next 2 to 3 years grow back into that environment. So that's a part of it. But for treating for ants that aren't actually there, no, I don't like that idea very much. And that's why I did not allow our bait to go into 100-gram foil packs to be mailed out to homeowners. I have enough problem with licensed pest managers doing the wrong thing, let alone uneducated people throwing stuff around swimming pools, fish ponds or whatever they do. So I believe half the stuff they've mailed out isn't even being put out. People just leave it on their, fruit bowl on their table. So sorry, good question. Some great questions there.
Yeah. And one other point that the same customer has just made is saying that he's seen the bright yellow bait right on top of the mound. So really good advice there from you and David about the bait being applied 1 meter around the mound for the foragers. So I have just answered that question live and said that we will do a how-to video to avoid that mistake being made because it is just not acceptable.
Well, that's a part of uneducated people putting stuff out. They think it's just going to be there. And that's the differences between the red-imported fire ant versus, say, the bull ant or, carpenter ants or, even coastal brown ants. They have differences and nuances. And this is what I train pest controllers up and people up about. We have to know what species. We're not just ants. It's a different species of ant and the way to go. So, no, I'm happy to help anyone out. I'm happy to type in the Q&A bottle, again, anything. So if anyone wants to get hold of me, they're quite welcome to. My phone number's on our website at syngentappm.com.au with also my email address. I'm happy to talk to anyone